Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. Welcome back to tonight's second half. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. Merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They all were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost you a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon and please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And gang, they definitely matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into tonight's second half, shall we? Alright guys, so we're kind of going to stay along that line of experiences as tonight's bonus. Instead of law enforcement, let's do some military. So let's get into those. Alright guys, every Dogman encounter is frightening and mind-blowing for the simple fact that we are told monsters do not exist at a very young age. The ones that stay with us for a long time are those that involve usually government, whether it be military personnel, federal personnel, FBI, CIA, or state and local police. They really, for some reason, kind of really stick out. And then there are the ones where there is kind of a shootout between a hunter or a person with a firearm and a dogman. So tonight, or today, that's the encounters we are going to have. Let's get into them. Today's first encounter. It was about 5 years ago that I had what I hope to be the scariest event of my life. I live in Texas my entire life, and I've spent a ton of time hiking through the desolate wild, but I had never heard of anything like what I saw on that day. I don't want to reveal an exact location of this place because I am sure there are at least a few people out there who would want to visit and attempt to lure these creatures in. Now, I'm a big believer in karma, and the last thing I want is to have enabled someone to become prey. It was an overcast day with cool temperatures, and I had decided to go out on a solo hike through this beautiful canyon area, a little over 20 miles from my apartment. My whole life I have suffered from depression. Luckily, I found the best way to combat it was to walk through nature. I make sure to do it at least 3 times a week. Nothing out of the ordinary has ever happened, so this event was earth-shattering for me. Just like any day, I was walking normally when I suddenly jumped at the sound of a gunshot. I walked up a small hill to my left, and when I got to the top, I immediately noticed a man. Dressed in casual clothing, sitting on the ground as though he had just fallen. He also had a pistol pointed at an animal that I could not identify. At first, I thought it was a very tall and lean bear, but then I noticed how long its arms were and that it was walking on 2 legs. Its legs were shaped differently from what you would see on a bear. Anyway, Texas isn't exactly known for bear mauling, so there was nothing about this situation that seemed at all usual. Even though the man and the beast were about 100 yards away from me, I could still see long pointed nails along with opposable thumbs. The thing didn't have paws like a normal animal. I could tell by the body language of this creature that it wanted to devour this guy. Although the man was fully grown, he paled in size compared to this creature. It had to have weighed at least 4 times what this man weighed. I felt obliged to help, but I'm a 27-year-old female, and I'm just over 5 feet tall. The last thing I wanted was for this creature to notice me and realize I was a better option for a meal. I hadn't seen it run at that point, but I could tell by its bulging muscles that it would be incredibly fast had it decided to sprint in my direction. There was a gulch that separated me from them, but I doubted it would be any major obstacle for this creature. I watched the man as he frantically tried to reload his weapon. At least, that's how it appeared to me. My adrenaline is pumping so hard, my brain tried to think of a way to help. So I badly wished that there was a way. I could distract the creature just long enough for this guy to make his escape. When the dog-like creature looked as though it was about to lunge at him, I don't know what came over me, but I suddenly shouted, "Hey!" in their direction. Just as I feared, the creature's head and ears immediately perked up and stared right at me. The speed at which it moved toward the edge of the cliff to get a better look at me was staggering. It was as if the creature glided rather than walk or ran. It was at that moment that I knew I had to get out of there. Even the man who had just gotten up from the ground was now waving his hand toward me, telling me to get the hell out of the area as quickly as possible. It was as he had raised his weapon and shot another bullet into the back of the creature that I turned and ran as fast as I could, back toward where I had parked. My car was less than a mile away, and I continued to run. I heard 2 or 3 more gunshots emanating from the distance. I also heard a noise that was sort of like a roar, but unlike any roar I had ever heard before. There was something undeniably human about it, as if it was also capable of speaking proper dialogue. Not sure that makes any sense, or what gave me that idea, but I don't know how else to describe it. It was all just so incredibly bizarre. By the time I had made it back to my car, there was a calmness in the air. I can't say whether it was because I felt safe, or if the energy of the environment had changed, but I'm a spiritual person, so I tend to believe in the latter. That all happened before I knew how the government does all it can do to conceal the existence of these creatures. So I regularly scoured the local paper and internet for any mention of what I saw on that day. I suppose I was hoping to come across some interview or something with the guy who I saw shooting at the creature. Now, I know that even if he made it out of there alive, mainstream publications would have never mentioned this event. If they did, by some miracle, they would write the event in a way that would make the guy sound crazy. I've done so much investigating on cryptids over the years, and whenever mainstream media publicizes a story on these subjects, there's always an undertone that makes it sound like a joke. Anyway, I sure hope that that guy made it out of there, but sometimes I feel as though it was close to impossible. I sure wish there was something more I could have done on that day, but I felt that all I would be doing is increasing the chances of there being 2 victims rather than 1. Today's second encounter. During my summers off from college, I had a job working on a ranch, where my only regular duty was to drive around and monitor the grounds, making sure that wild animals kept their distance from the livestock. The property was spread out across many acres, and sometimes that made it challenging work. Sometimes there'd be one other guy around my age, Jamie, who would be assigned to a certain section. There was this one afternoon when Jamie and I were eating lunch together that he told me about a mysterious sighting that he had earlier that morning. He claimed that he had seen something standing on 2 legs and, at first glimpse, thought it was a brown bear. However, he was aware that brown bear are not native to our region. Additionally, he said the legs were bent at the knees, in a way that it was very much like the hind legs of a dog, although he admitted his vision of the lower body was impaired due to it standing behind a fence. If it were for the fact that he was all the way across the field behind the opposite fence, he would have been much more intimidated. Jamie said it did not create any noise of any kind during the initial sighting, and by the time he had reached for his binoculars and raised them to his eyes, The strange creature was no longer there. Now, I wasn't one of those people who would immediately shut down the possibility of a strange occurrence, but back then I had never before heard of a cryptid that people commonly refer to as Dogman. Therefore, I leaned more toward the idea that there was a reasonable explanation. I had sort of forgotten about the whole story until a few weeks later, when I saw something utterly peculiar running across the field. The speed of whatever this thing was, it was astonishing. Before that moment, I didn't know any living organism on the face of the earth was capable of moving at a speed like that, especially on two legs. I'm not at all certain, but if I had to estimate, I'd say it was moving at around 40 to 45 miles an hour. I couldn't make out what it was carrying, but it looked to either be prey or perhaps even its offspring. That was as far as that sighting went. The next day, when I met with Jamie for lunch, I told him about what I had seen. I have to say that it was nice to know that someone else had seen something. Otherwise, I think I would have had a much harder time coming to terms with it. Jamie and I both agreed that we should tell the owner as soon as possible, and we thought it would be best to do it together, so it would sound much more credible. When we had approached the owner, Marv, we were surprised to hear from him that he had also seen this thing before. However, it had been years since his sighting. That was when he revealed to us that this mysterious creature was the primary reason that he started having workers patrol the grounds. He said that there were times when he would find dead livestock that nothing had taken the time to consume. He said that it was as if this thing just enjoys the act of killing, and will do so even if it's not hungry. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The way he talked about it was as if he was dealing with nothing more than a pack of aggressive wolves or something. It was like he had totally accepted that there was real monsters in existence. So what's the point of getting all worked up about it? Now that this thing was back, Marv equipped us with pistols that he wanted us to shoot into the air if we ever spotted the creature again. I was never really a big fan of guns, but I'll admit it made me feel a lot safer having a pistol on me while knowing what was in the area. I was so freaked out by the idea of seeing this thing up close that I was beginning to wonder whether I should ask for a raise. The speed at which I saw it move made it crystal clear that this thing was the ultimate predator. I did not doubt that it could sneak upon me at any time, and this made me paranoid enough to where I was constantly looking in all directions. I have to say it was pretty exhausting. If it truly did get enjoyment out of the act of killing, what was to stop it from killing one of us? A couple of weeks had passed without either one of us spotting this mysterious creature. It wouldn't be until I heard Jamie fire off not one but 2 gunshots that I knew this creature had returned. Feeling a responsibility to provide backup, I raced toward the area where I thought I heard the gunshots coming from. When I spotted Jamie, he was using his t-shirt to bandage his upper left arm. I asked him what had happened, and he explained to me that he was crouched over the body of a murdered lamb, and that the creature came out of nowhere and took a swipe at him. He immediately fired a shot into the air, but when the creature barely budged, he fired a second shot, this time toward the creature. Although he had missed, it was enough to scare this monster away. When I took a peek at the wounds, I was surprised to see that they were a lot thinner than I had expected. He said that it was still standing several feet away from him, and wasn't close enough to dig too deeply into his flesh. However, it was still enough to warrant immediate bandaging. He brought me over to the mutilated lamb. Even though it was a bloody mess, it looked as though this creature had only taken a few bites from the corpse before it had run off. So, I suppose it didn't always kill just for fun. Maybe it heard Jamie coming, and it stepped out of sight before Jamie noticed it. Jamie confirmed the massive size of this beast, and I remember him saying how, for sure, he thought he was going to die. He believed that if he hadn't had that pistol, there was no way he wouldn't have been there to tell me about the incident. When we went to tell Marv about it, Marv seemed pretty shaken about what had happened to Jamie. He seemed very discouraged by the event, and got on the phone and dialed the police right in front of us, although I noticed how he did not mention anything about Jamie's injuries. We watched from a distance as one police car rolled up to Marv's house. Jamie and I just sat there for a while observing, waiting to see if anyone needed us for anything. It wasn't long before a couple more police cars rolled up behind the first one, but none of the officers ever approached us with any questions. It was later that day that Marv informed Jamie and I that he was going to give us a paid leave until further notice. Believe it or not, those paychecks kept coming until the end of the summer, without either of us having to work another day. I always wondered what went on there while we were absent. Could he have gotten the authorities involved in this mystery in the past? I never saw it with my own eyes, but Jamie told me that he once saw a heavy-duty military-grade vehicle pull onto the long road that leads into the farm. I can't imagine what else something of that grade would have been needed for on Marv's farm. Additionally, could there have been more than one of those creatures residing near the property? Marv never mentioned seeing more than one of them at a time, but he was also very vague on the subject when we spoke about it. It seemed to me that Marv had a difficult time accepting that these creatures are real regardless of how long he had known about them. I've never seen a Bigfoot or any other cryptid, but given that I know with 100% certainty that these Dogmen exist, I don't doubt that there are all sorts of weird things running around in those woods. Today's third encounter. If you've ever been to Marietta, Ohio, you would agree that it has a charming but ghostly feel to it. My experience with the Dogman happened while I was visiting my college girlfriend back in 2006. We're both from Ohio and met while studying at the Great Ohio State University. My girlfriend, who I will call Lauren, knew I was obsessed with all outdoor activities. So she surprised me with a kayaking trip that was meant to last a couple hours. The day got off to a great start. Things like kayaking always got me in the best possible mood. It was amazing how quickly things got so dark. I don't think we had even been kayaking for more than an hour when suddenly we spotted a guy in a uniform who was standing alongside the river, waiting for us to get closer so that he could talk to us. He waved us down, so it was immediately evident that whatever he had to say was important. By the time we had paddled close enough to him, I could see around the bend that there were armed professionals. At first, it looked to me like a SWAT team had been called over to respond to an emergency of some kind. As I continued to observe the men, I soon realized that they were not police officers, but rather military personnel. I was so distracted by the activity that I only gathered bits and pieces of what the spore stranger was telling us. He had said that he was going to call for someone with a trailer to pick us and the kayaks up, since he was not legally allowed us to go any further. He also made it very clear that he wasn't permitted to reveal any details to us. It was while Lauren and I had begun to drag our kayaks out of the water, we heard this hair-raising growl, followed by gunfire. The only thing that I could assume at the time was that the men had been summoned to track down an aggressive mountain lion or black bear. However, my assumption that they were dealing with an ordinary animal would soon be put to rest, when out of nowhere this extremely tall, hairy figure came running around the river bend, and it was hobbling straight toward where we were standing. When looking back on it, something that is a tad humorous was how the ranger ran into the water before instructing us on what to do. Naturally, we did the same as he did, fully immersing ourselves into the cool river water. Although the Dogman eyed us as it hobbled onward, it was as if it knew it had no time for us. And of course, I was so grateful for that because this thing was fully capable of being a killing machine. I cannot even imagine a living creature standing a chance at surviving if this beast designated it as prey. I've heard some people say that a Bigfoot may be able to hold its own against one of these killing machines, but I've never seen one, so it's hard to imagine anything giving a Dogman a run for its money. When asked to provide a detailed description of this creature and what it looked like, and think the best way of doing that would be to tell you, go online and look up lichens from the Underworld movies. This thing was just as muscular as those creatures, if not more so. I'm also going to go ahead and say I believe it was taller than any of those creatures in the movies. I hope that whatever I saw was a full-grown adult, because if not, the idea of any land predator growing that large or larger chills me to the core. I feel like something of that size would be able to take down an African elephant single-handedly. I believe that the only reason that creature didn't kill every single one of those military guys was that it was likely drugged. I could tell by its body language that it was no unintelligent organism. It wasn't long before the man came around the corner and started firing at the creature. There was no question that they wanted to prevent any citizens from seeing this thing. I'm not sure whether any bullets penetrated the creature, since it continued to hobble at high speed in the other direction. Just after the creature disappeared from our sights, a black helicopter entered the area and hovered above the nearby woods that this creature had likely entered. Even though the ranger seemed to be almost as shocked by all of this as we were, he warned us that we were going to need to sign a non-disclosure agreement form before we were permitted to leave the area. He was right. Before the van came to pick us up along with our kayaks, a man in military fatigues brought out a binder from their vehicle that contained a stack of papers. It was a black binder that looked like it had been around for quite some time. I couldn't help but wonder how many signatures that thing had inside of it. Was this ordeal more common than I even thought? It all happened so fast that it's hard to give it some storybook ending. They had all of our information, and we were expected to remain quiet about it. Now, Lauren is my wife now, and we've told various friends throughout the years, at least the ones who we suspected would be interested and believe us. But I get feeling that a few of them believe us. I think they believe that something out of the ordinary happened, but it was likely a bear that we mistaken for a mythical beast. Just as with so many other reports that I've read, the experience gave birth to a new hobby for both Lauren and I. We've calmed down a little bit since then, but there was a time when we were reading, listening to, and watching every piece of Dogman-related content we could get our hands on. When you realize there is so much more to this existence than you had originally thought, it tends to make life more interesting than it was. At least that's as Lauren and I took it. However, I can imagine it being suffocating if you're the only one out of everyone you know that has had an encounter with a cryptid. There is no question that it is therapeutic for both Lauren and I to have the chance to share this event. I do believe that the whole thing brought us closer, and you wouldn't believe how deep some of the discussions get between us. It feels like we are immersed in this ongoing mystery that may likely never be solved.
Alright folks, I hope you all enjoyed tonight's second half as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. The first one was from Tom Lyons' Dogman Frightening Encounters, and probably one of my favorites out of all those books, just because the predicament we find everyone in. I think it's really cool. Definitely, and it's not because I narrated them or produced them, but it's definitely a very good source of encounters. But anyway, with that, I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It really does mean the world to me. You guys are the foundation of this platform, so thank you so much. Everyone, please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant. We know these creatures are real. We know they are out there. It's up to us to keep our family, friends, and pets, children, everything safe. God bless you all.